I woke at dawn, like I had for the past 5 years, in the cabin I built with my own hands. The wood stove hissed as coffee boiled, and mist curled up through the towering Douglas firs outside. No power grid, no HOA fees, no suburban sprawl creeping up the mountain. Just silence, independence, and a promise I'd made to my father before lung cancer took him. A man builds his own home. Every beam, every joint of this cabin carried that promise. But at exactly 5:47 a.m., the quiet shattered. Diesel engines rumbled up the dirt road, heavy and purposeful. I looked out the window and saw three Caterpillar bulldozers, two sheriff cruisers, and a black sedan that screamed corporate lawyer. They formed a semicircle around my home like a military operation. My daughter Sage was asleep upstairs, 15 years old, smart as hell, and tougher than most grown men I'd worked with. My first thought was to protect her. My second was to stand my ground. Nancy Ellington stepped out of the sedan, heels clicking on the stone path I'd laid myself. The new HOA president, dressed in a navy pantsuit that probably cost more than I made in a week back in my engineering days. She carried a leather portfolio and a smile polished for campaign posters. "Mr. James," she announced, "this structure violates the Federal Environmental Protection Act and the new HOA standards. You have 72 hours to evacuate." I sipped my coffee and watched her hand tremble slightly as she spoke. Someone was pushing her. The lawyer beside her handed me a fat envelope stamped with federal seals. Emergency environmental violation notice. Vacate in 72 hours. His tone was as cold as a death sentence. I flipped through the papers. GPS coordinates off by a quarter mile. Environmental assessment dated 3 days ago, describing conditions from 6 months past. Signatures that looked cloned. Amateur mistakes, or desperate ones. My hand drifted toward the drawer where I kept the original 1926 deed to this property. Nancy's eyes followed that movement, and I caught a flicker of panic before she covered it. Behind her, I noticed the bulldozers bore Sterling Development logos, not county equipment. One deputy wore tactical gear that didn't match standard uniforms. This wasn't law. It was theater. A land grab, carefully staged. Nancy retreated with her convoy, her smile brittle. 72 hours, she repeated. Don't make this difficult. I stood on my porch, mug steady in my hand, and let her leave. Quiet doesn't mean weak. She was about to learn the difference. That afternoon, I told Sage everything. She was sharper than most adults. "Those weren't federal agents," she said between spoonfuls of cereal. "The paperwork was fake." She was right. It was up to us to find out who these people really were. The county records office confirmed my suspicions. Nancy had lost over $1 million in failed crypto bets, then clawed her way into the HOA presidency to dig herself out. She'd signed a deal to sell 240 acres to Sterling Development for millions, with a $400,000 fee straight to her name. Sterling wasn't just a development company. It was a Cayman Islands shell laundering Russian money. Their playbook was intimidation, fake violations, forced sales. And my cabin was the keystone that opened access to thousands of acres. By the end of the week, the attacks escalated. A local paper ran a headline branding me a hermit squatter destroying wetlands, complete with doctored aerial photos. My bank froze my accounts over fake HOA assessments. My property taxes jumped from $200 to $14,000 overnight. At school, Sage's teachers treated her like a criminal's daughter. Kids told her she'd be homeless soon. Nancy wasn't just targeting me, she was going after my child. Then Marcus Chen reached out. 26 years old, the HOA accountant, trapped by threats to his immigration status. He slipped me a flash drive with financial records. Nancy had siphoned $180,000 from HOA funds into offshore accounts, all tied back to Sterling. Emails laid out the entire scheme. My cabin wasn't an accident. It was step one in a corporate takeover. I wasn't the man Nancy thought I was. Before the mountains, I'd spent 15 years as a senior federal engineer, specializing in land surveying and environmental law. I knew every trick in their book, and I wasn't alone anymore. I brought in help. Sarah, a former FBI investigator who'd exposed corporate fraud before. Elena, my old environmental law professor, sharp enough to carve holes through their fake assessments. And Rex, my neighbor down the mountain, a Vietnam vet built like an oak tree who'd seen enough bullies for one lifetime. Together, we prepared. Meanwhile, Nancy unleashed a propaganda war. Drone footage spliced into lies, AI-generated satellite images showing forests stripped bare, social media posts turned me into a villain. But I'd installed trail cameras years ago, documenting every season in high definition. Those cameras caught Sterling's men cutting trees and dumping debris to fake damage. The real smoking gun: footage of Sterling executives trespassing, surveying, and sampling soil months before Nancy ever showed up. The breaking point came at 2:17 a.m. one Tuesday. Glass shattered. Heavy boots on the porch. Sage's voice upstairs: "Dad, men with flashlights." They weren't cops. They were Sterling's private contractors, armed with fake warrants. But they hadn't planned on Sage. She grabbed her phone, went live, and told the world, "They're breaking into our house. They're not real police. They're destroying everything my dad built." Her voice was steady, her eyes blazing with fear and fury. 47 viewers turned to 15,000 in minutes. By morning, millions had seen it. Hashtags trended. News outlets swarmed. Suddenly, it wasn't me versus Nancy. It was David versus Goliath. Money poured in for my defense. Veterans, off-grid families, libertarians, all saw themselves in my fight. Nancy panicked, doubling down with AI deepfakes of me confessing to crimes. But her lies unraveled faster than she could spin them. Marcus exposed her embezzlement in a board meeting, shattering her support. The FBI, already watching Sterling, stepped in. When Nancy staged a fake federal raid with actors in Forest Service uniforms, the real feds moved. Search warrants, wiretaps, the works. The final act came at the community hearing. The place was packed, cameras rolling. Nancy strutted in, clutching her evidence. Fake images, fake audio, fake witnesses. She called for a vote to expel me and demolish my cabin. I waited. Then I connected my tablet to the screen and played the trail footage, years of untouched wilderness. Then the recordings of Sterling's men dumping debris. Then Marcus stood, voice shaking, and confessed everything Nancy had forced him to falsify. Elena explained how Nancy's environmental violations were themselves federal crimes. Rex spoke about freedom, about bullies in suits who were no different from those he'd fought overseas. Nancy cracked, screaming that it was all fabricated, that she had lawyers and federal connections. But by then, the FBI agents in the room had heard enough. They rose from the crowd, badges out: racketeering, money laundering, environmental fraud, impersonating federal officers. She was cuffed before the ballot boxes opened. The community voted anyway, 187-3 against Nancy. The HOA dissolved. My cabin stood. In the months that followed, the fallout spread far beyond Timber Ridge. Sterling collapsed, executives indicted, Nancy sentenced to 7 years and millions in restitution. My cabin became a gathering place, a symbol of resilience. Sage, who had turned fear into fire on a live stream, earned a scholarship to Harvard and national awards for civic engagement. Marcus got his residency and a job with the FBI. Rex found new purpose, leading veterans in fights against HOA abuse. And me? I still wake at dawn, brew coffee on the wood stove, and watch the mist rise through the firs. But now, children play in a community garden where Sterling once planned luxury condos. A sign carved by Sage hangs on my porch: James Family Cabin, where truth lives, community thrives, and David always wins. The real victory wasn't saving my land. It was proving that knowledge beats money, patience defeats panic, and one determined family can bring down an empire built on lies.